Welcome to another TDM discussion. Hey everybody, TDM Tim here, and I'm here with TDM TA, and we're going to have another episode of TDM discussions. On today's episode, we are covering the subject of college Un-koch. So, with no further ado, TDMTA, will you take us out?
Alright, so, before you get the wrong idea, not cocaine, Koch brothers. That's my title. So, but we're going to talk about how the Koch brothers, and specifically the Charles Koch Foundation, has basically influenced universities and colleges across the country. The first one I want to talk about is the case of George Mason University. Now, George Mason University, for a little bit of context, is the largest public university in Virginia. And really the scandal of the story, or of this particular college, and really is the story of a lot of the colleges that we're going to talk about today, is that the George Mason University granted the Charles Koch Foundation basically a say, or they have a say in the decision process of hiring and firing professors. And they got this by basically donating millions of dollars to George Mason University. Obviously, this creates a massive conflict of interest and is just flat out corruption by whoever accepted it. I imagine the dean probably and his board. But really, it's really disgusting. It destroys the idea of academic integrity, and I'm going to talk about in a minute here about why it basically destroys the idea of what a university is supposed to be. Specifically, the way the Koch Foundation has done it. But we're also going to talk about a little bit down the line what George Soros does, because it's not just the Koch Foundation. It's not just the Koch brothers. So you also have the university president, Angel Cabrera. He wrote a note to his faculty basically saying that the agreements of this transaction of the Koch Foundation donating to the university, he admits that the agreements that they had fall short of the standards of academic independence. Basically what I just said a minute ago. So we have the university president agreeing with that. So then you really, this all came out, in the case of the George Mason University at least, this all really came out when there was a student named Samantha Parson. And she filed a Freedom of Information Act request to get these documents that were between the college, the head of the college, and the Koch Foundation, the Charles Koch Foundation. And she had filed it many, many times, and almost all of them were denied, except for one, which is why this story broke. And you also have this organization, which I'm going to talk about in more depth later on, but this is also tying into this. She's part of Un-koch My Campus, which is exactly how it sounds. And they noticed a similarity between the documents that were released from the George Mason University Freedom of Information Act request to documents that were found at Florida State University, which was another scandal a couple years ago. Now, for a little bit of context of why the Koch Foundation might be wanting to get into the business of basically hiring and firing professors at universities, the Koch Foundation, or well, specifically the Koch brothers, are very big on libertarian economics. That's like their big thing. Is they're very laissez-faire, and they try to push that into any kind of avenue they can, through politicians, through universities, through their foundations, through whatever it may be, however they may think that they will get their message through. So they'll go to different economic schools or colleges in universities. So in the case of George Mason University, you have also law schools, right? Not just economic schools. So you have George Mason University. This is just an instance of like their influence in this. This is not particularly a like damning case, but it's just an instance of like their influence of their money. But you have George Mason University naming their law school after Antonin Scalia. I mean, that on face, whatever, but it's just kind of like, it came out after the Koch Foundation had donated $10 million, with another $20 million from an anonymous donor, according to Un-koch my campaign. So, I don't know if you have any thoughts on this first part of the story that I want to talk about.
Oh, well, of course I do. This is a very dangerous situation that higher learning has been maneuvering through for quite some time. Our universities are unfortunately, typically, strapped for money in some way, shape, or form. I'm not saying they're poor, but they could go with more funding. And so the power of the donor has grown more and more over the decades, especially when you have massive donors like the Koch brothers or Soros. And that kind of money has a lot of sway. But the problem is, like you said, and like the article said, it compromises academic integrity. And unfortunately, that is one of the most critical things to our society. So it's not something you really wish to be compromised. You want universities to be a center of free thought and discussion for a multitude of opinions. And when individual ideologies have massive donors like this, it kind of dominates the conversation because they fund the programs, they have a little bit of say over the curriculum and over professors, and ensure that a certain way of thought is taught, which is quite unfortunate. And without better funding, I don't see how this truly could be resolved, at least in a way that leaves universities better off than they are currently.
Yeah, so really, I mean, the issue is not that the Koch brothers are donating necessarily, but the issue is what results after that. Is that, as I think you alluded to, that universities, well, really anything, really, when they're not adequately funded. If you donate a large sum, like the $10 million that Charles Koch Foundation donated, you're going to want to try and please that donor so that maybe in the future they will donate more. And in this particular instance that I mentioned, it was renaming their law school after Antonin Scalia. Now that in itself, not a big deal, but it's just the idea of the corruption, and it just so happened coincidentally to happen after a $10 million donation from the Koch Foundation. I mean,
and really, the renaming is not the more terrifying aspects of it. It's the control over curriculum and professors.
Yeah, I'm going to get to that, and I'm going to get to that in a little bit. But yes, that's the actual bad part. But I only mentioned the renaming because I think it's indicative and symbolic of the sway that the Koch brothers have. It's not inherently like a bad thing renaming your law squad to Antiquity. That's not inherently like an evil thing that is going to destroy America. No.
And I guess as a devil's advocate here, though, there are people out there, and the Koch brothers may even be of this opinion, that feel as though the way universities and higher education is structured encourages liberal thought more than it does conservative thought. And so they may feel as though they are compelled to have to support conservative thought in universities because there is a correlation between higher education and being more liberal.
Yeah.
That's not really something I want to get into because it's a very long conversation. But at the same time, even using that argument, it should be more the zeitgeist of the moment of higher education that turns us towards conservative thought and not just the wallets of wealthy individuals.
So that everything that I just talked about was from the AP, from the Associated Press. So the next little part of the story that I want to talk to is really, it's going to be in junction with what I just said. It's a little bit more information, but this is from Time. So this is going to give you a couple more numbers. So Time magazine is telling us that a pair of private foundations that were founded by the Koch brothers poured about $23.4 million into U.S. colleges and universities during the year 2014, just during that year, according to a Center for Public Integrity Analysis. Now, this number is significant because that's several more $1 million than the $19.3 million that the Charles Koch Foundation and the Fred C. and Mary R. Koch Foundation together spread among schools during 2014. And also, it's nearly double what they spent in 2012. So, really, the number, the amount of money that these organizations, specifically the Koch Foundations, with an S there, there's multiple of them. The amount of money that they're donating every year is increasing and increasing and increasing. Now, if you want to look at the other side, you want to look at George Soros. That's going to be the first response from any ardent Koch defender, I'm certain. Which is a fair criticism. It's a fair point to point out the stuff that George Soros does, because he is also a vastly wealthy billionaire. He also has his own interests, and he's going to donate to politicians. He's going to donate to foundations and universities and schools and stuff. That's just, of course. So, you have George Soros, who spent slightly more money on a smaller number of colleges and universities than the Koch Foundation did. So, you would think that means he's going to have more sway over those particular colleges that he donated to, because he donated more to smaller number of colleges than the Kochs did because they donated to more colleges. So, but the notable difference between what the Koch brothers do and what George Soros does is that some of George Soros' higher education grants go to programs that align with his domestic policy priorities, but the majority are focused on overseas programs. So most of it goes overseas. Not a lot of it just goes to like for example, George Mason University hiring and firing professors based off of what the Koch brothers says, or in this case, what George Soros says. That's not the same thing that's happening there. So, and then you have almost all of the higher education programs that the Koch brothers or the Koch foundations fund promote the idea of free markets and laissez-faire capitalism and basic libertarian economics, which, again, that's not inherently a bad thing. And I love the fact that universities have programs and classes that teach these kind of ideas. But on the other side of the coin, you have to have classes that teach Marxian economics, stuff that teaches Keynesian economics, which is the standard. That's going to be your typical macroeconomics, microeconomics class. That's Keynesian economics. But you want to have all these different ideas if you're going to be well versed in this, or if you're going to be surrounded in this on all these ideas, which is the point of a university. Your preconceived notions are supposed to be challenged. So, I think that the most disturbing thing, though, in my opinion, is that in some of these cases where the Koch Foundation has basically gained influence over the university, the Koch Foundations have attempted, and in some cases succeeded, in attaching certain strings to their contributions. So, again, like we said earlier, when in exchange for the donation, they would have a say in hiring and firing professors. So the same idea here, but in this case, some of them were controlling curriculum, or even more readily nefarious, I guess would be the phrase, is that they obtain personal information about students. I mean, I don't know, like, I haven't seen anything that George Soros has done where he literally just controls the curriculum and then obtains personal information about the students. I don't think there's really like a comparison, which is what I'm trying.
The situation is that as a society, we should condemn bad actors no matter their political belief. And it shouldn't matter left or right, the Koch brothers' views or any individual's views. If the Koch brothers are being a bad actor, aka doing these donations the way they do and controlling curriculum and professors and gaining data on students, they're a bad actor. It doesn't matter that they specifically are bad actors that are also libertarian.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. But the only reason why I'm drawing this comparison and contrasting the two is because I know that the first argument is Soros.
Oh yeah,
that's the only reason I'm bringing up George Soros, because I know that's going to be the first thing that many people are going to respond with is, but what about George Soros? Well, I'm trying to put that out here. All right, so the last bit I want to talk about is the organization known as Un-koch. This is an organization dedicated to exactly what the title says, is to unkoch my campus, to get rid of the Koch brothers' influence in universities. Now, there's 4 universities that they're really focusing on, and they just so happen to be some pretty big universities. There's Florida State University, which we mentioned earlier, George Mason University, which we also mentioned earlier, but there's also Ball State University, and there's also the University of Kansas. Now, their kind of like mission, I guess you could say, is they want to kind of expose violations of academic freedom, outside interference in faculty governance, violations of donor policy, conflicts of interest, misinformation, and anti-transparency. And really, to this day, the last information that I saw is that they've only been successful in one university that they've worked on, and that's Suffolk University. And it is the only school to have, quote, unkocht themselves after taking over $1 million from Charles Koch. So, I mean, progress is progress, but if this isn't, I'd say that if this is an issue that anyone is concerned about, I would definitely take a look at this organization, and I would definitely check or try and see if there's any Koch brother influence, or George Soros influence, I guess, in your college or university. You could probably do that by filing a Freedom of Information Act request. That's always a good way to do it. Just like how I mentioned earlier, I think her name was Samantha Parsons. That's how she did it.
Thank you for watching another TDM discussion. Once again, if you like this content, please leave a like and subscribe. And, more importantly, comment and let us know what you think about this. We'll be sure to get back to you and maybe we can have an interesting discussion. As well, as always, the link to our Discord group is down below. We have recently started up a new book club and we are reading through at least a book a month. So if you wish to join in, see what books we are reading and read along and discuss with us, we will be doing that. Check out the TDM website, the link is below as well. And as always, have a great day.